Welcome to our second ABRESO workshop. I put the agenda in here for you to gaze at, but I'm going to jump, try to. I put the agenda in here from our first workshop just to remind everybody that in that we had a significant amount of time set aside for presentations of the overall project goals as well as from each nation. And then we had breakout groups. After the workshop, we gave everybody a chance to fill in a short poll about the effectiveness of that workshop. And about a third of the participants in the workshop filled out the poll. And of those third, 100% stated that the workshop was useful and rated it somewhere between very good and excellent. But most of those people also mentioned that there was a lack of sufficient time for discussion. So we've designed today's workshop to address that issue, as well as to progress our overall collaboration by focusing discussions towards the end today on what we intend to accomplish together. So after I'm done chatting here for a couple minutes, we're going to go immediately into breakout group discussions. And we're going to initially have those for about 30 minutes, and then we'll take a 5-minute break. And during that break, anyone who chooses to can move with Sarah's help to a different breakout group, if you'd like to do that. And then we'll continue discussions for almost an hour. And what we would like to see happen in that discussion is continue whatever you began in the first 30 minutes, but be sure to spend some time discussing the overlap between and integration between national efforts, and also leave a little bit of time to organize and prepare just a short report out, because at 8:40 Eastern time, we'll spend 10 minutes, couple minutes from each breakout group, just getting a little summary of what happened. And then we'll end with just an open discussion of what major conclusions we may reach and what next steps we want to take. Okay. And then I thought I'd just close my little introduction here with an image from our original proposal, which is showing a schematic of how we're managing or governing this project. And so you can see down here in the bottom right-hand corner that because we in the US led the proposal, and also because we got some additional funding from the US NSF, we're overseeing the whole project, just making sure everything gets done. But you can see the next level down here is what we're calling our ABRESO Management Committee. And this consists of 2 representatives from each nation. And this is, oops, sorry about that. This is where all our governing and real decision making about the project occurs. Then there's all of us here today, and then some. And that's down here, that's the project. And we've broken out, at least loosely, into 2 working groups, one for the social sciences and one for the natural sciences. And then on top of all that is the added complexity of this same approach happening in each country. So we're hoping that what happens in each country gets fed into the project level. And in the meantime, the PIs, we're all working to keep things moving. So today's effort falls down somewhere in this overall project effort. I'm just gonna say we had a great conversation in our breakout group, and I'm hoping you all, the rest of you, did too. And I know it's stunning to me how quickly an hour and a half goes by when you have people from a whole bunch of different countries sharing their ideas and thoughts. And I'm thinking, so that we can get through this reporting, could anyone from group one prepared to talk for a, you know, like a minute or 2.5? Anyone? Anything?
Yeah. I can say something if you want. Now, right now.
Yeah.
So, so we had a small group. We were, I think, 6 or 7, mainly people from. The main case that were presented was Taiwan, Italy, and France and US, and that Japan was slightly less represented towards the end. We had one main discussion, I think, was to identify how the way people are going to evaluate the drivers in the different countries. And so we try to exchange on what are the main drivers of land use change and how they are going to be evaluated in the different countries. I mean, we had already identified in the first workshop, but we identified other common trends that are clearly appearing in the different case studies. Just one example, we discussed the decay of tea production and tea production in Taiwan and wine production in France, and how it's in some areas substituted by environmental friendly production, sometimes for different reasons. We discussed the in fact of decreased population in Japan and in the valleys of Italy. So there are these common trends that are appearing in the case studies. What is not totally clear is what we are going to do about it in terms of in an international, at the project level, international project level. There may be an opportunity to either report the different trends, the different drivers that have been identified in the case studies, or try to build common stories in the website that could be around 1 or 2 main drivers that are appearing in the different case studies. The thing that we discussed also is how the identification of the drivers enters in the overall research that is taking place in the different case studies. And there is quite a diversity in the situation, and I don't feel totally able at the moment to make a synthesis of that. I don't know whether Janet wants to say something about how the different case studies are going to use the identification of the drivers to in the research. It's been quite diverse, so yeah.
Well, Philippe, you seemed somewhat hesitant to speak up at first, but it seems like you have plenty to say. Janet, do you want to add anything? We could use a minute and before we move on to the next group.
Well, it's just highlight that I guess one of the 2 things. One seems to be a major thing is that looking at what the perceptions of drivers are and matching it with what is validating those perceptions seem to have come across several of the countries. But the other is trying to figure out how does it integrate into the other questions. We didn't get very far into that, but we did start talking about them and how it's related to perceptions of the outcomes of land use change, question 3, but also I think interestingly how does it fit into research question 4, the scenario development. So we did start talking about that, but not in any depth. I think that we need to have cross question discussions for that.
Thank you. How about group 2?
I think I'm designated. Could I share my screen, Sarah?
Oh, wait, you have slides to share with us?
Well, just my notes rather than me just jabbering at you. It might be easier to. Now you've thrown me off my game, Tim. I'm now.
I was just trying to figure out, do you have staff people creating slides in real time?
Did that work, or we're sharing the wrong thing?
February discussion.
There we go. That's what we want. Yeah, it just
Yep.
didn't show up. So we looked at, we've spent a lot of time talking about how we might use concentration discharge or CQ relationships to understand effects of land use, land change. But we could structure that discussion in terms of understanding changes over time, either through space for time substitutions, where we compare under current conditions a variety of land covers, land trajectories, or perhaps actual long-term records. And then we also discussed how the structure of the critical zone, the geology, slope, rainfall, et cetera, whatever, can affect concentration discharge relationships. And then we looked at how do we make these comparisons? Like, there was considerable interest in, can we identify a good or a well-functioning versus a damaged critical zone? And how do structure or extreme events drive changes over time? What are the ways we can compare? And then finally, we looked at the international collaboration. Well, how do we structure that? Because this was a large group. We had as many as 26 people in the group. We decided for now with something of not a strict, a few delegates from each country meet, but have more of an open tent model, I believe is what we're gonna, that we really need representatives from at least each country, but that others who are interested are welcome to participate. And there's interest in understanding how we can collaborate or compare notes across countries in terms of approaches to managing, regulatory approaches, what practices on the ground give us the desired result in terms of improved water quality. So that's our report.
Thank you, Bill. I can see in what you said some similarities between your conversation and the one that we had in group 4. Hide, did you want to add anything?
No, perfect. Thanks, Bill.
I don't remember who was in charge in group 3.
I will report back.
Thank you.
So yeah, so last time we didn't have enough time to ask questions about each case. So this time we spend enough time to explain each case study sites, who are the stakeholders, how their perception of the land use change and drivers of the land use change, and also the associated ecosystem services and these services. So we spend nearly like 10 minutes for each case, and then also about 8 participants joined this discussion and asking the question each other about the specific, including very specific questions. And we found that mainly Taiwan, Japan, Italy share the kind of same issue about land abandonment, and also the depopulation is a key kind of drivers. Depopulation, population decrease, and the climate change are the kind of major drivers of the land use change. And then, in Japan, that the farm abandonment and the forest abandonment is major issues, and in Taiwan, like tea plantations and the abandonment of tea plantations are the issues. And in Italy, the pasture abandonment are the major issues. In France, the vineyard abandonment sometimes taking place, but it's mainly because of the land development or urbanization. And also in the same in US, the more urbanization and the population increase is and also the climate change are major drivers. And we found a different type of the ecosystem services and these services, and we discussed how we're gonna frame the kind of common the questionnaires in the future to so that we can do some kind of joint survey about the ecosystem services and these services, and also the perception of the land use changes in the different study sites. So yeah, so those we discuss, and then also in the last point, we one of the participants pointed out that is there any conflicts among the stakeholders, and I think which is also kind of important questions. And then that we found in Japan there is a conflict between farmers and fishers, or not direct conflict, but it's very sensitive issues in the small town to discuss between the farmers and also the other fishers. And there are some of the similar cases in other study sites, but not all the cases. But I think having the discussing or investigating conflict will be also the point for the study. So these are some of the discussions we had, and maybe the Herring can add on some additional points.
Arlene.
I think those points are well said, but I want to mention about the last questions. I think the questions from the Ministry of Forestry in Japan about the conflict, and then we did not have time to elaborate on that one, but that could be the very interesting topic to pursue further. How different stakeholder views the other stakeholders and whether they have conflict between themselves.
Yeah,
That's it.
Thank you very much, Harry. And yeah, so that's all.
Excellent. Thank you very much. River, do you want to give it a shot for our group?
If possible, Tim, may you first?
Me first?
You first.
Okay, well, so
Thank you.
we had a great conversation. It was a small group. There were only 6 of us. And honestly, a lot of what I've just heard you guys all talk about came up in our conversations. There was a fair bit of talk about aging population. And so I think what I'll do is skip what was similar between what you said and talk about what was maybe a little unique. One of the things that came up was transportation and policies around transportation and how that can affect population. And we also talked a fair bit about education and in a community. So that was all fairly new to me. We did talk about the similarity between Taiwan and Japan and the Alps in terms of them being very active tectonic landscapes. So the landscapes are constantly moving upwards, whereas in New Hampshire and France, the landscapes might be a little bit older and stable. Everyone pointed to some extent to the importance of climate in the development of the landscapes that we work on and live in. We also thought about the similarities to some extent between land use regulations. It seemed like Taiwan and Italy may have been a little bit more restrictive, one being within national parks and the other being a protected drinking water supply. Whereas while there are restrictions in New Hampshire and Japan, maybe less so than what we heard described for Taiwan and Italy. We spent a little bit of time talking about how we might actually quantify land use change and these social demographic causes of it. And we began towards the end of the conversation to think about limiting the period of time in which we might make that assessment. Because we talked a little bit about, in the US, we're looking at European colonization, the European style use of the land having begun hundreds of years ago, whereas in some of your countries, we're talking about millennia of land use. And so we talked about limiting the period of time over which we would assess land use change maybe to something like just before World War II to present. And then the last thing I'll say, Sheng Lin, our social science colleague from Taiwan, felt that we need more detail in understanding the case studies in each country before we can probably flesh out the comparisons and differences and how we might work together, which I think I heard a couple of you say, we need more time. Yet again, we haven't had enough time for discussion. So I just think it really points to our need to have working groups and really, somehow start focusing our conversations around working groups. Do you want to add anything, River?
No, you say all our discussions. Great.
Well, so we have a couple more minutes, and anybody speak up, please. And I really mean anybody. We need input. Any thoughts? Janet and Osamu and Philippe, I know you guys have organized around a social sciences working group, and I'm just curious, is that focused on our PI group and those of you within that group who are social scientists, or are there more people involved?
It's whatever, it's the researchers, so it's whatever group wants to come in. So we have, I don't know what you mean by the PI group, but it's anybody who's involved in the groups that are doing the work, the research work is involved in these conversations. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and how frequently are you guys meeting?
We meet about once a month. Yeah. And yes, once a month, and we're working on developing a joint survey right now. And so I think it ties together a lot of these perceptual issues that have been coming up, and trying to figure out what is something that we can assess across the different countries.
And just roughly how many people are participating in that?
10 to 12, I guess.
Okay. And so I'm going to turn to Bill and Hide and just ask, because, Bill, you pointed out that in your group today, I think you said you had 26 participants. The rest of us all had 6 or 8, or, and I'm just curious if you guys think out to working groups, how might we organize in a way, that's effective? And it seems to me like 26 is a lot of people to try to have at least for everyone to have something to say. But I don't know. I'm just curious if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I do. I think 26 is really hard to get things done, in terms of it's great to generate ideas, but then I think smaller groups that are focused on specific tasks or products should be our next, not that we abandon the large group format, but that we also have some breakouts. So I think maybe we should have this in the next executive committee meeting, Tim.
Yes.
Or we just have but I don't want to just say, oh, it's the natural science group. No, I think we should have this as a topic, for the next executive committee. How do we, this is a great turnout. Thank you all for being here. It's a lot of people. And it's like, well, let's put our energy to good use, to good end, and come up with some interesting and exciting insights and opportunities. So I think the example of the social sciences is probably the direction we should go. Although at this time, we're not generally talking about collecting new information on water quality. More we're saying, well, how do we analyze what we have? Now, that's not always the case, but So we're on a fairly similar track, I think. But we need to talk about this as a leadership team.
I'm just going to highlight a couple things and then we'll close out here because I see we're 1 minute over. First of all, many thanks, right? With both these two workshops, we've had great turnouts. It's a little less this time, but we've had great turnout, and that's what we need and want. I totally agree. Let's just plan as our management committee. Let's just plan that our next meeting, this is what we're going to focus on, is moving forward and how we're going to drive these discussions and input from everybody but in an effective and efficient manner. And so with that, I'll just say, because I don't think we have another meeting scheduled, so please look to your email management committee for a doodle poll so we can find a time to meet, and we'll plan on this being our main agenda item. Are there any other thoughts before we close out today? Well, I'll just say especially thank you to our Asian partners. I know you're up late at night. Thank you for staying up. You probably have family and wine waiting for you instead of talking to us. Thank you very much. And we'll see you soon. Thank you very much. Have a good.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye-bye. Good night.
Sarah, can you stay just a second?
Bye. Bye. Ciao.